This is Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement with Mark Cordner, the podcast.
President Trump continues to use the threat of tariffs on certain goods coming into the U.S. What could we expect if and when the dust settles? Well, here's NBC News business reporter Christine Romans.
You'll feel it in a new car, anywhere from $3,000 to up to $12,000 extra for the price of a new car. But maybe first you're going to feel it in the grocery store. Think of all of those things that are imported from Mexico and China. Mexico in particular, all of that fresh produce, all these perishable items. From Canada, we get gasoline. From China, we get electronics and toys. Mark Zandi over at Moody's Analytics says you should expect another $1,200 to $1,300 a year for the typical household just for the higher prices for all of these things.
I mean, Mark, I'm sitting right across from you. I'm shaking my head because, I mean, seriously, I was just in the grocery store. It was me and two other women in the same aisle, and you could almost see we were all doing the same thing. We were like picking up items, comparing, ounces to the cost and how much, and do I really need this? Should I get this? I mean, and we all just kind of looked at each other and we said, how much longer is this going to go on? And how are we going to survive? My gosh, I'm just trying to feed my family, let alone pay for anything catastrophic that comes my way. I mean, it's a big worry for someone like me who is far from retirement. I can't imagine somebody who is right there on the brink of retirement.
Well, there too, I would say we need to sometimes take a step or two back because we really don't know the long-term implications of this. There are many people who feel very positive about balancing out the imbalances in our trade relations. And I'm not a macroeconomist. I don't understand all of those issues. What I will say is that things are cyclical. We see that in markets and we see it in politics, we see it in life, and we just flat out cannot predict where things are going. So I think it's actually a good thing that people are becoming more sensitive to what is essential in life and what is maybe a luxury or not as essential, because many of us, with the markets being as good as they have been and the economy generally as good as it has been over the last couple of decades, many people have just gotten into a pattern of not thinking about what they spend. They just live their lives. And so I wouldn't say it's altogether a bad thing. There's many things, obviously, that we can't control. Mm-hmm. And so to the degree we can't control it, well, let's just step back and let's not get neurotic about that. Let's look at the things that we can control and focus on that. I think one of the best things we can do, to be really candid, is to turn off the news media. Many years ago, chose to start reading my news, and I read from many different sources, but I don't listen to the commentators because they tend just to have their own level of anxiety-inducing speech patterns, and their whole job is to get you excited. And again, I just say, let's take the long view on this. Yes, we're going to have difficult times. They tend to be short-term. The universe is not constructed on decades, it's constructed on millennia. And so let's just think long term. So that may sound a little trite, but I honestly think that there's wisdom in not getting too worked up about the short-term issues. Let's focus on what we can control.
Well, I mean, speaking of things we can control, I mean, honestly, right now, it doesn't seem like very much from, the cost of living, the cost of groceries. We still have inflation creeping around here a little bit. We've seen the stock market more volatile in the past couple of weeks here. I mean, how do we know exactly where we should stand, where we could stand, and of course, staying the course as well? I mean, you mentioned your two-pocket approach here a few moments ago, those that should be in the market, those that shouldn't be in the market. I mean, again, I'm listing a bunch of things because that's what it feels like, at least in my brain, is I got groceries, I got cost of living, I got the market volatility, I got inflation. How do I find a balance to make sure I'm still on track and I'm not risking it all?
Well, I think part of it is just remembering that none of these things are new. I mean, these are not new things. We've all experienced them. I mean, maybe it's a function of my age that I've lived through a little bit more than you have. These patterns are not new. I mean, we've seen high periods of inflation in my lifetime, and we've seen low periods of inflation. We've seen crazy government activity. We've seen wars, and we've seen catastrophes in the environment, environmental catastrophes. We've seen all sorts of problems, and those are going to continue. And so, again, I say take the long approach. So the two-pocket approach is all about having some money out of the market, some money in the market, long-term money in the market, short-term money outside the market. What that does is it buys us time to get through these weird, difficult times that will continue to happen because it's the nature of the world. Now, yes, things do seem to be happening more quickly because we're more globally interconnected. But again, these are not things that we individually can control. And so rather than get worked up about trying to find some magic balance out there, I would say, again, let's focus on the fundamentals. Do we have 3 to 6 months worth of emergency savings in the bank? Do we have some midterm money that is totally safe out of the market? Do we have long-term money in the market so that it can outpace inflation? This is long-term thinking. And whether we're working or in retirement, those principles are the same. Now, in retirement, yes, we do need to be more preservation oriented because we can't typically go back to work and rebound from large losses. So, yes, we do need to be more, again, preservation oriented, but that's just a natural inclination of humans. Again, I tend to say, turn off the news. If you're going to get it, read it. Read it. Don't get worked up, because at a certain point, we just literally all become neurotic.
Now, outside of tariffs, and we got taxes from Trump that he wants to, implement different changes here. Now we got his BFF Elon Musk here turning heads in more ways than one. Not only is he hunting the government for waste, we all know he is the head of DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. He has also told the Joe Rogan podcast that Social Security is just not sustainable.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
Right, explain that.
Well, people pay into Social Security and the money goes out of Social Security immediately, but the obligation for Social Security is your entire retirement career. Like if you look at the future obligations of Social Security, it far exceeds the tax revenue. But basically, people are living way longer than expected. So you have more people who are retired that live for a long time and get retirement payments. So the future obligation, so however bad the financial situation is right now for the federal government, it will be much worse in the future.
All right, let's break this down here. Of course, while Musk is comparing Social Security to a Ponzi scheme, it does sound extreme. By the way, Ponzi schemes obviously illegal. Social Security, not so much. It does highlight its solvency issue, which that's no secret. We've talked about it, Mark and I, for weeks at times, right? I mean, its estimated benefits could be cut 25% by 2033 if Congress does nothing to shore it up. So my question is, if Social Security becomes less reliable, what strategies do you recommend to help clients have a secure retirement, Mark?
Let me come back to that. That's a great question as to what strategies. So remind me if I forget. But let me address this thing with Elon Musk, because I think it is a critical concern. It does create anxiety for people. I think he is not wrong in saying that the program as it currently exists is not sustainable, but I think he is absolutely wrong in suggesting that it can't be fixed, because we absolutely have historical precedent for the program being tweaked and in significant ways. I mean, we have to take a little bit of a history lesson here to see perspective. Let's go back to 1935 when Social Security was actually established. At that time, life expectancy was age 62. Benefits were to kick in at age 65. So there was this obvious realization that Social Security was a short-term safety net. It was designed during the Great Depression to keep our most vulnerable population, our elderly, from literally starving to death. But the assumption was that benefits would pay out for 2 to 3 years. Elon is absolutely right. People are living longer. Now we're living 2 to 3 decades, not 2 to 3 years in retirement. And that has mathematical implications. The other thing that has mathematical implications is the fact that in 1935, we had 43 workers for every Social Security beneficiary. Now we have about 3 workers for every Social Security beneficiary, and it's quickly going to 2 workers. So we absolutely have a problem with what was once a financially sound program no longer being financially sound, but it's a result of demographics, which doesn't mean that we can't fix that. I mean, back in 1983, when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill came together for that great compromise, they introduced 2 new principles. One was that they were going to delay the payout from Social Security to age 65 up to age 67. So those of us born after 1960 now have full Social Security benefits. Our full retirement age is 67. That's when we get 100% of our benefit. They also introduced the taxation of benefits, which hadn't existed previously. Now, I cite this perhaps boring history simply to just point out that they made changes which prolong the life of the program. We can make those changes again. I'm quite convinced that Social Security will continue because it's a moral obligation that generations of Americans have planned on. And unlike Elon, most Americans are not so wealthy that they can just disregard this form of income. So it is a safety net, and there are too many Americans, unfortunately, who exist far too much on Social Security benefits. So the way to make Social Security last is we simply have to postpone benefit payouts. Well, that's not a positive answer if we index it to life expectancy. So maybe it only pays out for 5 or 10 years of average life expectancy. Well, that would be a more sustainable scenario. If we tax it more, for example, that would be a more sustainable scenario. So there's things we can do to salvage the program. Yes, I have concerns for younger people, of course, because they're carrying a heavy weight. But that has a lot to do with birth trends. Americans are having fewer babies. I mean, this is across the entire Western civilization. Certainly, we see horrible problems in China from their one-child policies. And I don't mean to pontificate about this, but the fact that we're not reproducing at a rate to really sustain our societies is a big concern. From a cultural standpoint, we're seeing it all over in Europe, especially in Italy, but also from a sheer economic standpoint. We don't have either the funds or the infrastructure in place to provide the services that aging Americans need, such as long-term care. And so I'm a big advocate of immigration. I prefer it be legal, absolutely, but we need people. I mean, I saw this firsthand when I lived in Europe in the 80s. I lived in Europe for 6 years, and a couple years in the 80s, I remember immigration trends, and people were bleeping and moaning about how it was changing their culture, and it absolutely did. But those immigrants have saved Western Europe because Western Europeans are not having enough babies. And so there's a number of problems here. I don't mean to go on too long, but they're fixable. They're fixable if we're willing to tighten our belts and think long term, which most politicians are not. So back to your original question, what do I do to help people who are fearful of coming short on Social Security? Well, I'm a big advocate of saving earlier and saving more as we get older, as we approach retirement. You know, people in their 20s ought to be saving about 10% of their income, and then 15% in their 30s, and then 20% in their 40s, and so on until we get upwards of 30% or more of income being saved prior to retirement. Very few Americans are doing that. And I realize that's very difficult. All of my children have neurological disorders. I've always had more medical expenses annually than my father ever earned in his working years. And so I understand it's difficult. It can be very difficult. And because of that, I wasn't able to save as much as I wanted. And I had business setbacks, but I'm saving big time now. And so we just have to think differently. And most Americans are living for the moment. So I apologize. I'm on a little bit of a soapbox there. These are fixable problems. I don't think we need to get neurotic about it. I think we absolutely need to pressure our political representatives to, man up, as it were, and deal with these issues instead of waiting until the last minute, which is exactly what happened in 1983.
I wonder if a lot of folks out there, and I'm sort of this thought too, is that, we got the insolvency issue to 2033. We've got, President Trump wanting to take the tax away from it. Now we got Elon saying it's a Ponzi scheme. And let's be honest, he's going to do whatever he wants to do when it comes to Social Security, from what it seems. I'm almost of the mind of when I sit down and plan for retirement, I don't even think I want to factor in Social Security. I think that's almost like a cherry on top. If it's there, how it's there, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, do you have a lot of people saying that to you and go, look, let's just focus on what I have, not this whole uncertainty bag of money over here?
Yeah, that's a very common sentiment, particularly among younger people. And I would say, great, then if you want to plan that way, let's plan that way. And you'll be fine with or without the program if we actually follow through with that. I'm personally convinced the program will be there in some form.
Yeah.
I don't think we should ever plan on it as our primary source of income, because it was always declared not to be that. It was supposed to supplement personal savings and family resources.
According to a new study by Schwab, this is where most retirees get their income from. Here's the list. They say 40% from the 401k, 20% Social Security, 15% savings and investments, 11% pensions, 4% part-time work, 3% annuities and insurance, and then another 3% from real estate. So that's 7 different places where people are getting income. Mark, I want to know, is that common? Do you see this a lot? And of course, is there anything you would add or take away from that list?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely common. I mean, sometimes there's business owners who have the sales value of their business or ongoing income through a structured buyout. There's things like that may come into play. Absolutely, we see more use of home equity conversion mortgages, which is really wise. I mean, on the street, these are known as reverse mortgages. They're grossly misunderstood. They're a wonderful, wonderful program created by the government, not for everyone, but wonderful for people who understand them. And it can be a source of tax-free income for people in retirement. And so, I mean, we do that a lot with our clients. I don't personally sell mortgages. I've taught these concepts for over 20 years, and I introduce them to people who can help them out. They can choose to implement the strategies or not. But those who do usually end up with about 1/3 better estate implications. So they're better off when they do that. One of the things we have to remember is not all sources of income are taxed the same in retirement. And so we need to be very conscious about which pocket of money we're reaching into at a given time. I mean, this is one of the issues when we talk about bridging Social Security, for example. Do we take Social Security earlier or later? Well, when we recognize, for example, that we could pull money out of a home, do that tax-free, well, that can be very helpful. Again, because of the tax-free implications, that's really a big deal. So anyway, there's more to learn about these programs because, again, not all sources of income are taxed the same, so we need to be strategic about which pocket we're reaching into at any given time. And one of the things we're absolutely seeing on the rise, without question, is very renewed interest in annuities. And again, I'm not shilling for any particular product, but one of the there's two things about annuities that make them incredibly attractive to people that learn about them. One is the fact that we can get money out of the market and grow it in a very respectable manner with either tax deferred or tax free, dependent upon if it's in an IRA account or not. But the other thing that they uniquely do is they can effectively create a private pension, so income that we can never outlive. And for people who are anxious about outliving their money, and that's the number one fear of retirees is outliving their money, then annuities are uniquely positioned to do that. There's nothing else on the planet that can do that in the same manner. So we often call these income contracts because it can create income that you cannot outlive, you and your spouse, if you have a spouse. And so from a security standpoint, we want to look at all sources of available income, and we want to structure it in a manner so that people can literally not have to think about this stuff. What I find is that over the first 6, 12, no more than 18 months, what I'm saying and what the client is hearing are often two different things. And that comes into alignment with repetition. The more we repeat the concepts and people become familiar with what we're saying, then the science behind what we're sharing becomes clear to people. And it's wonderfully liberating when that light bulb goes on, because then they go and focus on the things that life is about, which is not money. Money is just fuel. You know, it's like gasoline stored up in a tank. It has zero value unless it's propelling a machine that's, taking us somewhere on a journey. And so money is no more than that. We don't want to give it more value than that in our lives. But once these clients understand what it is we're doing, they're liberated to literally not worry about these things because they know we've got them covered. And so we would just say to people, if you have anxiety about outliving money and what monies you should use when and how different sources of income it's taxed, if those ideas are foreign to you, come visit with us. That's what we've focused on for 30 years. I absolutely do not know everything, but I have learned a lot through 30 years of extensive reading. Well over $100,000 spent on education over the years, and quite bluntly, meeting with hundreds, if not thousands of families over that time and seeing the experiences they have, the challenges they have.
Investment advisory services offered through Golden Years Financial LLC, a registered investment advisory firm. Insurance is offered through Golden Years Insurance Services. These firms do not provide legal or tax advice. Consult your own legal and tax advisors before taking actions that may have tax implications. Investing in securities involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Insurance contracts principal protection is based on the claim-paying ability of the respective insurer. None of the information contained on this website shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit to buy a security or insurance product. The information and opinions contained on this site or requested from this site are provided by third parties believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are provided for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. Any media logos and or trademarks contained herein are the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement by those owners of Mark Cordner, Golden Years Financial, or Golden Years Insurance is stated or implied.